Hello, I'm Eric Schoenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company, and I'm glad to welcome you here to the Inc. 5000 Vision Conference. In the archetypal entrepreneurial buddy story, college classmates bond over a vision for a company and then grow up together as they start the company and scale it. That's one way to frame the origin stories of Airbnb, Warby Parker, Casper, even Facebook, to name only some prominent examples. Now, the pair of entrepreneurs you will meet on this panel don't follow that mold exactly. They were classmates at Harvard, but then went on to found two separate, highly successful companies and joined forces only after they had exited. But the mold breaking is not anything new to Alexa von Tobel and Lucy Deland. Alexa's the founder of LearnVest, the innovative financial planning firm she launched when fintech wasn't even a word, and which she sold to Northwestern Mutual for $375 million 5 years ago. Lucy served as COO on the founding team of Paperless Post, the design-forward invitation platform launched in 2008 when most people were convinced that design didn't matter online and that no one would ever pay for a digital product. Yeah, right. Let the record show that Paperless Post now is a network with over 100 million hosts and guests. Lucy and Alexa teamed up together a couple years ago as partners at Inspired Capital, a different kind of investor operator VC firm based in New York and fired by the experience of two original thinkers and true entrepreneurs and dedicated to supporting small companies that aim to tackle big problems. We'll have an interview for the next 30 minutes or so, then Alexa and Lucy will answer your questions. So if questions occur to you, submit them to the Q&A box and we'll answer them in the last part of this session. Okay? Now, on with the show. Alexa von Tobel and Lucy Deland, welcome to the Inc. 5000 Vision Conference. Thanks for being here.
Thrilled to be here. Thank
you for having us.
Now, let's talk about that vision for Inspired Capital. Both of you saw the same problem that could only be answered by a new kind of VC firm like Inspired Capital. What was that problem? Alexa, could I ask you to go first?
Sure. So first of all, it's so fun to be up here on stage with two people I call dear friends. I think Lucy and I, for about call it 5, 6, 7 years in the trenches of standing up companies. We both were recession founders. We talked many times about, in our future life, if we were investors, and we both started on the investing side, we kind of talked about the sort of people that we would want around the table as, if we were to do it all over again and build another company. And it just was this idea that kind of kept, something we'd circle back to. It was kind of an infectious concept of what would it be like if we went and built our own venture firm and helped mentor and shepherd entrepreneurs of tomorrow for the future. And one day it just literally came out of our mouths and we were like, I think this is happening. And Inspired Capital was born. And I think what we looked for is, building a company is extremely hard. And in fact, we tell every founder we meet, it's, easily a decade of your life to do something very, very well. It's nights and weekends. It often eats up into your personal life and there's kind of no boundaries. And we wanted investors that not only understood that really intimately, but also dive right into the boat and start rowing, give you the exact sort of psychological safety that you need, especially when you're a first-time founder. Building a company is brutal. And so much of the struggle sometimes of building a company is getting better yourself. And so we kind of just said, imagine if you could build an entire firm based on investor operators who could just help founders see through corners, see around the corners, see their vision faster and stronger and really help them build it. And then the final thing is we grew up in the New York City tech ecosystem, which back when Paperless and LearnVest were being born and stood up was really nascent. And now it's a thriving ecosystem. And we just said, we know our way around the East Coast tech scene really well. We obviously know the West Coast is, quite well also. But, it was just born out of something so authentic, which is we were the kids building companies. And now we get to be on the other side and helping the next generation of founders for tomorrow.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Lucy, what do you say to people when you describe how Inspired Capital is different from other VC firms?
As Alexis said, I think one of our major insights as investor operators is the investment in the person, the founder behind the organization and the learning curve that you are on. That is often what unlocks the company and what inhibits the company. And so I think, as Alexis said, creating a really safe and nurturing environment for those founders to figure out where they need to grow, how we can help them do that, and helping them to sort of both illuminate their blind spots and then deal with them in service of the company and of themselves, and making that a conversation and not we'll find out how, where your blind spots are when something breaks. And so I think we kind of engender that from the first time we're meeting a founder, and we're very open with all the things that we did right and the many, many more things we did wrong and what we learned along the way. And I think that helps sort of create that reciprocity from day one.
Okay, let's talk about your companies. You have been friends, since the Harvard days, and then you went off and started separate companies, and yet you stayed friends. What was it like following parallel entrepreneurial journeys together in New York? How'd you support each other? Lucy, could I ask you to go first?
It was invaluable, and I would tell every founder to find their peer who's going through it with them. So Alexa and I think LearnVest and Paperless have birthdays that are 60 days apart. And that was incredibly important for us. We were one another's red phone. We were who we sort of hashed out big strategic problems, small personal problems with in the background. There was an incredible amount of sort of solidarity. And it was also amazing to have someone outside of your own company, because within your own company, it can become an echo chamber. And so someone who had sort of an outside looking in view. And then really importantly, in that person, you need someone who's brutally honest, who expects incredible things of you, so that while they can empathize, they're still going to tell you to get back out there and actually aim higher and do more than what you were planning on.
Alexa, is having a friend like Lucy different from having a co-founder?
What was so amazing about Lucy is, first of all, she's brilliant and an exceptional operator who can see through noise very quickly. And I think for everybody out there, to kind of add back to your question on Inspired Capital, Eric, you want a firm, when they give you money at the early stages of building a company, that changes your trajectory very quickly. And one thing is, if you're just an investor, you can be an incredible board member. But there is something unique about having built and scaled businesses, that you just realize how heavy the lift is for a CEO and the management team. So we dive right in with you. And you can kind of even just get a sense from us today. We're high achieving people with big goals. We believe in extreme amounts of hard work. And there's a lot of humility to being a founder. It's the only job that, as you are getting better at it, it gets harder, because as you're getting better, it means the company's doing better. Your learning curve is getting steeper, and you're just constantly on a treadmill of getting better and having to see, through immense amounts of stress and chaos. And then you add in COVID, for example, and you're like, who saw that turn coming? That is what it's like to be a founder. And so, first of all, it's so much fun, and to get to have built something alongside Lucy, and then now to build something with Lucy. We also, building a company is an extension of a founder's being in so many ways. And so we want to be there to help make that vision as big as possible, but also to have fun while doing it, because it is minimum a decade of your life's work to build a company that's category creating and that changes the way people live and operate, et cetera, et cetera. So you want Lucy in the trenches with you.
Okay, let's go back to the very beginning of those two companies, which the origin stories of which are both kind of monuments to the entrepreneurial spirit. Alexa, you dropped out of Harvard to start LearnVest at a time when that just wasn't done. There must have been many people who said to you, what were you thinking? And so the question I have for you is, what were you thinking?
So I dropped out of Harvard Business School in the fall of 2008. Literally, Lehman Brothers went under. I'd won a business plan competition, and I decided to take a 5-year leave of absence. By the way, at that time, Lucy was, helping stand up Paperless Posts, and their journey had gotten started. And I remember looking back on it, nobody thought it was a good decision. Everyone, including some of my, best friends, who said to me, "You've lost your mind. This is a terrible idea." But I had always had a very kind of contrarian view, which is when the world zigs, you have to zag. And I was infected with the vision for LearnVest, and there was no way I was not going to go build it. But so what I was thinking at the time was, holy smokes, this is going to be really hard, but I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life if I don't do it. And I've got to go figure it out. And I was armed with a 75-page business plan that nobody read but me, and decided to go and stand up this business, and kind of committed to myself that, I had a few years to figure it out, and just got to work. And I will say it was really helpful to have trusted people like a Lucy at that time, because we shared all notes, we compared all notes. It was, how do you find the best CTO? What do you do for an employment lawyer, and all the things that you need. And we were just trading back and forth, and having the time of our lives in retrospect. But what I was thinking was that I was completely crazy, Eric, and everybody thought I was. And in retrospect, it looks like a genius move, but at the time, it definitely was not a cool thing to do.
Lucy, kind of the same question for you. You had a good job at Inside Ventures Partners, and then you left that to stand up Paperless Post right in the teeth of the Great Recession of 2008. What drove you to do that?
Yes, we all read the RIP Good Times deck, and then I decided that I was going to go directly into operating, and at the seed stage, no money in the bank, no users, no nothing, just an idea. But I think it's not that dissimilar from so many founding stories. It's, you can't not do it. You get infected by the passion for what you're planning on building. You really believe that it should exist, and you're willing to, and you kind of have to suspend disbelief. And then I think, we did have the great fortune of incorporating the business on the day Lehman collapsed. So that felt rather ominous, but, kind of like we're coming from the ashes. And that was sort of the sign that there's no such thing as higher ground. So why don't you create your own future? Because everywhere where people had gone thinking they had these long, secure futures ahead of them were starting to crack. And so I think, as much as it was a scary, scary time to start a company, it was also a time that said, there's risk everywhere in the market. So at least enjoy what you're doing, and believe in what you're doing.
Well, you would not be crazy if you said right now is a scary, scary time to be starting a company or running a company too. What does your experience getting started in 2008 teach you about running a company or starting a company in this economy? Alexa?
So I think a lot. I will say one of the biggest benefits of people who team up with us at Inspired Capital, Penny Pritzker and Mark Batzian are two of our other partners. We've all been deeply versed with building businesses in recessions, and I think it teaches you. It cuts your teeth in a much sharper way when you have to build a business at a time when you have nothing. Nothing is easy, and so resilient founders are the founders that we look for, because first of all, you can never plan for anything, right? God loves to throw out your plans. And so what we always look for is people who have tremendous endurance. Back to this, you're infected with an idea in a way that is so much bigger than, I want to go and build a business or be a CEO or solve this one specific problem, but it really is a passion. It's oozing through you, because it takes that chemistry and that commitment to get you through some of the worst and hardest challenges. But we also look for people who have plan A's, plan B's, plan C's, plan D's for a company, because all of a sudden something like a COVID happened and your plan A and B all of a sudden went out the window, and you need to go and figure out how you're going to make, $100 go a lot farther, and how you're going to retool something. And so much of being a CEO is dealing with really complicated problems. And Eric, I like to use the analogy of being a CEO is like being an ER surgeon, where you have a patient that comes in from a really, really complicated accident, and the patient needs 7 surgeries, but you can only do 1 at a time. And you've got to make sure that you keep the patient alive and thriving after it. But you can only do one big hard thing at a time. And your job as CEO is often to figure out which is that one thing. And you're kind of alone in making that call. And so we look for people who have the commitment, the charisma, the passion, but also the strategic creativity. They're exceptional planners. And then again, just that resiliency to get back at it every day. Because as Lucy can tell you, we both had some of the darkest days of our careers building our businesses. And then you had to wake back up and get right back in the ring and go back to work and, keep telling people why you're going to figure it out. It's really helpful having gone through it. I think it helps us help our founders go faster.
Alexa, as a CEO myself, I really understand that analogy of the ER surgeon. That is really the way it is sometimes. Lucy, how has this pandemic crisis and the associated recession affected the way you look at companies at Inspired Capital?
Well, I think that having started up in a recession, what I really appreciate in retrospect is the discipline it gives you and the very real and everyday challenge of sort of fighting to live another day, which is the nature of being a seed company. And it makes you dead focused on finding that product market fit, of appreciating and becoming obsessed with your customers, of listening really carefully because you can't miss that insight. And I think sometimes, being you don't want to be so capital constrained you can't do what you want to do. But I think sometimes being so flush with capital that you don't feel like you need to listen to others in the market can be inhibiting to really creating a rock solid strategy. And I think everyone getting shaken by COVID and kind of saying like, okay, we've got to go back to brass tacks. We've got to figure out exactly what our value is. We've got to figure out exactly why the market is going to support us, as I said, living to see another day. While it has definitely been a trying time for companies and for some in our portfolio sort of getting a little shaken, it's also been an incredible time for learning and for really getting back to the core of what it is that is going to differentiate them. So I would say, embrace the challenges. It's hard to build a company, and it doesn't matter if it's in the most exciting and flush times. It's still really hard to build a company. So I think having like a macro situation that helps sort of shine light on focusing on the most important things, as Alexa said, doing the right surgery first, I think is actually a value add, in addition to obviously creating a lot of challenges and noise that I would never discount. But take that focus and use it to your advantage.
Okay, all right. Let me dig a little deeper in what you were saying about being forced to listen to customers at a time like this. Paperless Post evolved its business model a lot by listening to customers. Can you give us some example of how what you ended up with was different from the way you thought it would be when you started, and how you got to that conclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So our business model was contrarian to begin with. We heard a lot in the market when we were starting up that no consumers would ever pay for anything on the internet. And I think obviously the last decade has proven out at Paperless and tons of other consumer startups that is not the case. But we went in with that conviction because we believed we needed to build a product that was going to be worthy of a consumer taking out their wallet and paying for it. And that was going to be a really good signal for us. And then it sort of went in the opposite direction of so many companies and introduced a freemium model on the back end of that, so that we would be able to be present in our consumers' lives in more moments than just those where it was appropriate for them to be pulling out their wallet. And so I think actually we kind of like took the harder mountain first and then gave ourselves an easier slide down the rest. Although we could go back and debate hindsight and 2020 vision. But it definitely created an incredible amount of product discipline in the beginning to say, we're going to create something that people are going to pay for.
Not only products have to evolve. Alexa, you were saying earlier that you have to grow as a leader, and that part of scaling a successful company is basically scaling your own mentality. I'm not using your words exactly, but that was kind of the idea. Talk about how you evolved as a leader.
I mean, I look back at like 23-year-old Alexa von Tobel, who founded LearnVest and then dropping out of business school. And one of the things I often tell entrepreneurs is the amount that you're going to learn doing this job is just tremendous, because everything matters and you have to get better. And there were days where I would wake up and say, wow, I truly now better understand compliance and regulatory environments and tech and product market fit and why Amazon Cloud is the best. And you would step back and say, wow, I've truly learned years worth of school in half a year. And through it, it's just the humility that the deeper you get into it, the more you have to grow. And so for me, it was a bunch of things. One, it was surrounding myself with people like Lucy. So having, a few incredible friends and allies who, as Lucy said earlier, tell you exactly what you need to hear. And often it's not what you want to hear. It's what you need to hear to be able to get better, to be able to fix a problem, to be able to deal with something that you have as a shortcoming. I have tons of shortcomings. I hired an executive coach at one point when I was 25 years old, because I knew I was 25 years old. And I was like, if I really want to build a great company, I know I'm going to have to get better. And I had grown up as an athlete and I always trusted coaches. And I kind of said to myself, why wouldn't I have a coach for this thing that I've never done? Let's just kind of give myself the space to grow, which in retrospect, thank God I did. It was a great decision because I learned my own blind spots. I learned my own strengths even better. And so much of it, so it's about, personal growth, recognizing that of course you're not going to have all the answers, and that vulnerability. I remember this huge change in my own career when I started just saying, I don't know the answer. I have the vision and I have the passion and I'm here to build. But of course I don't have all the answers. I've never done this before. And I think that kind of gives the people around you a lot of space to say, okay, I can help fill those in. And then going back to, having people like Lucy, getting really honest feedback is a really hard thing to come by because most people don't want to tell you the really gritty things that you need to do better, or why your product sucks, or why some portion of your customer experience is still very hard to understand. But having that board of advisors, that trusted group of people, in a perfect world, it would be your investors too, who can say, hey, this isn't working. Let's do something else. And that kind of space for that psychological trust is so invaluable. And thank God I had it. It's one of the things that made LearnVest better. It's definitely one of the reasons why we, in the end, had a great outcome with this successful exit. But it really was about creating the space for honest feedback. And most of feedback is not good, right? It's things you have to do better. And just leaning into it. And I'll end by saying I have this concept called LITTP, lean into the pain. Lean into the pain. You want to know the worst thing that you're not doing right. You want to know the hardest part of your business, and then you want to fix it right away. And that mentality of just diving right into the core, the nucleus of the problems. Once you start to adopt that as a founder or CEO, you get so much better because you just start dealing with the hardest problems. It's not fun, but everything gets better, and that becomes more fun. So that's a little bit of how I think about it.
That's a great answer, Alexa. As a CEO, it is hard sometimes to get honest feedback. So it's important to have a friend like Lucy or a board of advisors. Do you use employee surveys to get that kind of lean into the pain feedback? This is a question from one of our viewers.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Yeah, I think employee surveys were an invaluable tool, but need to be done really thoughtfully and at a time when you know that you have the space and you have the commitment to act on them. I also think 360 reviews a number of times a year. I think a lot of managers and executive teams think of reviews as an opportunity to give feedback to their employee base, when in fact probably the biggest thing you can gain is feedback on your managers and your executives. And I think that's also the transition point in a startup, particularly for that founding team, that is so important to go from being the doers on the ground to the leaders and managers exclusively, versus really being able to get in and on the ground floor and do things yourself, and making that transition holistically at the right point in your company is incredibly crucial. And I think continually gaining feedback on whether or not that's happening and whether it's happening effectively is really important.
Lucy, you've put your finger on one of the toughest things for entrepreneurs to pull off, is that disengagement from being the person on the ground who does everything, that raises their baby the way they want their baby to be raised, and passes that off to professional team of executives. How did you manage that at Paperless Post. And Alexa, I know that this is a topic that you've considered a lot. But Lucy, could I ask you to go first in answering that?
Yeah,
How you manage
absolutely. It was a very explicit transition because as a founding team, we were, I would say, we over-indexed on being doers. We loved building product. We love huge releases. We were pace setters and were, doing 5 jobs from 8 a.m. until midnight for the first couple of years of the business. And that did not scale, nor did it leave room for others to take responsibility and do a better job on one of those 5 jobs that we were doing. So personally, what I did was working with a lot of the leaders underneath me and saying, do not give me write access to this document. Give me only read access. We will only discuss it live, and that's where I'll give you my feedback. I'm not going to participate in the doing, and we have to actually set up physical boundaries for me at first to get used to that, and for you to get used to that, and me being out of it. So I actually think it is sort of a personal evolution, but you can bring in tactical ways to almost force yourself out of the details.
I love that example, kind of tying yourself to the mast.
Yeah.
Alexa, along the same lines here, a viewer asks, can you give us an example of one of those episodes of feedback that was painful, but that was important for you to hear?
Absolutely. And on the heels of the last question, also, one of the things that my executive coach taught me as we were, I was 25, right? Then I was 26, 27. A lot of our leadership team was professionals. They had 15, 20 years of experience. And one of the pieces of feedback, and I remember it was a drawing, and it was literally a picture of the team, which should be executing month by month, the management team, which should be executing quarter by quarter, against the year goals. And then it was like the CEO, who should be living with the board 3 to 5 years out of setting the strategy. And I remember somebody drawing this and then looking at my calendar, and it was like, you're clearly literally living in the not only sometimes month to month, but the quarter by quarter. And you've got to get your head up and get out so that you can now think about the full strategy. You can build the vision of where we're going. And through that, and at that time, it was basically a polite way of being like, Alexa, you're in the weeds, get your head up, you're in people's way, and start setting the much bigger vision for the company, and really clearly communicating what that is, and doing the strategy and the planning. And that landed in me basically starting to take every month, I would take half a day and just do strategy and lock myself in a room and share it with my advisors and people for feedback. But that gives you a good example of basically a big thing that I learned, which was get out of the weeds, get out of people's way. And I wish I was as smart as Lucy and, said, only give me read access. But that's a little bit of the sort of feedback that you get. And another just tiny piece that was invaluable for my life was I've been wearing basically a Fitbit, for call it almost a decade now, because I quickly learned that I was never my best self if I would pull all-nighters a lot, or sleep 3 to 4 hours and then do it again and sleep 3 to 4 hours, and no surprise, you're not a good version of yourself after 4 nights of not sleeping. And so just starting to create these basic infrastructures of you can't manage other people if you can't manage yourself. That was a really good thing that I kind of burning yourself to the pulp also doesn't make the company better. And it's just, again, obvious. It's an obvious thing. But when you're in it and you're living and breathing for the business, you often burn both candles too hard. And so it was just learning to think really thoughtfully and long term. And those are game changers for me.
That's great. One of the viewers asked a question. Both of you and many of the people who've appeared on the Inc. 5000 Vision Conference speakers lineup are products of this country's greatest educational institutions. But what about people who don't have college education, and what would you recommend to them about starting a company? Is that an insurmountable disadvantage?
I would say absolutely not. But I would deeply encourage them to reach out to create a network of those who've done it before, of those who are in startups right now, either like at the front lines of building an organization or have joined early, and surprise yourself with how many people are going to be willing to spend time with you if you ask, and you make that ask really discreet. And, can I spend 30 minutes with you, and can I start to learn from you? I think a lot of us underestimate how much people like helping other people. And so we don't believe that we can ask for that time. And what is really crucial and what is so helpful about having a foundation and is having relationships with people like Alexa. My Harvard education is something I value deeply for myself, and I'm so lucky to have it. But the real result of it, and the thing that impacts me on a day-by-day basis, is the relationships that I invest in that came out of it. So much more than what I had on that campus. So I would say, just double down on building your network and building out the set of people who are going to help you through that experience.
The only thing I would add to that is just that the internet these days is an incredible place. You can learn how to build and run a company and get CS classes. And I mean, the amount of access to information about how to build is better than what in many cases is being taught on the best campuses in the country. It's all open source. You can see the content, you can get access to people. And as Lucy said, people want to help. And I know at Inspired, we have kind of open office hours where we take entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes because we want to pay it forward.
Well, one category of entrepreneurs who have been famously underrepresented, especially in the capital markets, are women. What advice do you have for women founders to follow in your footsteps in an industry, or I should say, maybe a career path that is still dominated by men?
I'll take this one because it's just something that's so close to my heart. First of all, I will just say, Inspired Capital, we're a $200 million venture fund that happens to have 3 female partners. And one amazing thing about us is we're not a female fund. We're just a generalist fund that happens to have great women at the helm. And we're really proud of that. And both Lucy and I, over the last decades of our career, we're often the single female. I was the only female in fintech. Lucy was helping redefine consumer products, and one of the only kind of leading females there in many places. And one thing I do like about being different is I think being different is an advantage. And in so many ways, one, we have to make the numbers better. I mean, it's abysmal, and the fact that I think it's like 2% of female CEOs get access to capital, and those numbers apparently are getting worse this year, which is really upsetting. I'm really proud to say at Inspired Capital, we have, in our portfolio, about 40% of our founders are female, which we're really proud of that. But I will say, people have asked me many times. I was a young founder. I was a solo founder. I focus on every day going to work and just being the best. I didn't think about that I was young. I didn't think about that I was a first-time CEO. I didn't think about the fact that I was a woman. I just said, I have to be the most informed. I have to outwork people. I'm going to use everything I can to give me an advantage wherever it is. And to Lucy's point, I reached out to anybody who would talk to me. And lots of people opened doors and were willing to be helpful because they love the mission. And so one thing I would just say is, see around the corners. People want to help you. Think about every asset that you have that you can use as an advantage. And I'm proud to say I hope the world keeps changing because we need it to.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, I would encourage all.
Yeah, go ahead. Over to you.
I was going to say, I would encourage all women thinking about founding companies to do it. And like we were saying at the beginning, suspend disbelief and get into the ring because, as Alexa said, we not only need the dollars to go to them, but we need so many more stepping up to start companies, because that will result in a better set of companies from these years than I think if we don't have that representation, because there's a huge amount of thinking and talent and energy and fire that we would be missing if they didn't do it.
Amen.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, Alexa, I've I've heard you say that one of the great things about your current job at Inspired Capital is that you get to live 10 years in the future. So this is the Bing 5000 Vision Conference. So fast forward into some of your portfolio companies that will be the dominant companies 10 years in the future. Which ones are you excited about?
Well, so we've said many times that we started this year in 2020 and we're kind of ending it in 2030, which is, I think we're living through one of the most rapid, advancements in our lifetimes because of digital and technology and COVID. There's a few companies in our portfolio that we're really, really excited about. Just to give you some of the concepts, we have some health tech investments that, recognize that the future should be far better for the way that we manage and think about our healthcare and our access to healthcare and our own records in ways that are very powerful. There's a company that we are thinking about, which is trying to help make everything around the dental market better and more exciting. We have companies that are reimagining how money moves. Right now, money moves very slowly. It takes, in many cases on ACH rails, 5 days. Imagine if money was frictionless and you could have self-driving wallets and the management of your money every day was actually done for you via algorithms with very, very smart controls. So we do spend all of our time thinking about the future, and I get excited about that because the future is a beautiful place. It's going to solve problems. It's going to make the world better. It's going to lift people up. And the fact that that's what Inspired Capital is all about. It's about getting behind inspired founders and helping their dreams come true.
Lucy, some of the companies that are your vision of the future from the Inspired Capital portfolio?
Yeah, and obviously a lot of these were exciting, as Alexa said at the beginning of 2020, and I think our excitement about them has just accelerated in to what we think adoption curves are going to look like. So we have a company that is actually a scheduling app for high schoolers. And I think, as we're looking at a COVID hybrid world and how high school will happen over the next 10 years, I think is going to change dramatically. And this is an app that really serves the high schooler. It's their first task management app. It's their first time management app. And the adoption has just been explosive, I think, because it was very helpful when they were all in the same building every day. And it just transformed into absolutely crucial as the world has transformed over the past 6 months. And like Alexa said, we think that there's amazing opportunity to disrupt industries that are wouldn't have as sexy of a sheen. So as she was pointing out, Dandy in the dental space, coming in and saying there's a 10x better way to do this. Even though I think the dental space isn't a space that you would, think of just consumer investors flocking to. And we've got some really exciting investments that are transforming how people can utilize their payroll to pay for their health events and keep them safer and in a better financial situation. And I think we'll see more and more fintech solutions that collide with really real life applications that go to the benefit of sort of every American in their everyday life. So much like LearnVest started from, as you said, before fintech even existed as a term 10 years ago, and really seeing that next evolution of what can be done in that space.
Go ahead.
I was going to add one last one. There's a great app, if everyone hasn't downloaded it, called Geneva Chat, which is, first of all, the embodiment of it is a safe place to be with your community, just given all the noise that we're living through. And it basically is Slack for your everyday life with your friends and family. And it's an incredible tool. So I would recommend people download it.
What's the name of it again, Alexa?
Geneva Chat.
Geneva, like the Swiss city.
Yep.
Like Switzerland.
All right, great. Yeah, good. Okay. What's the one thing that an entrepreneur should do to get on the radar screen of Inspired Capital? Lucy?
Well, the first thing you can do is just reach out to us. As Alexa was saying, we're looking for people to reach out to us that want to spend time with us. So our contact information is on the website. I think both of our Instagrams are readily available through sort of the Inc. promotions. We are here, we're listening. And the second thing is, it's always helpful, as we were saying, like to build that network and ask for those intros. And don't be afraid to ask for 30 minutes of anyone's time. You deserve it, and you can probably help that person in some way too. So that's the way to get on our radar, but I think that's also just the way to get on every sort of investor / advisor / future employee's radar as well.
Okay. Alexa, once someone has their foot in the door, what's the most important thing for them to do? What do you want to see from that person who has now gotten your attention as a way to impress you?
So I think, first of all, we want to see somebody who really does, have a category creating vision. So, you're not just here to build one tiny feature, but you understand that this feature is going to allow us to go build this platform, which then allows us to take over this entire market and, get rid of and eradicate competitors because we have this advantage. So really looking for just incredibly thoughtful founders with big visions who understand the commitment that it takes to go build, business. Building a business is really hard. And we have so much empathy for founders. And so we want to understand why they want to do it, how big their strategy is, and then why they think they're uniquely special to do it. So we look for that founder market fit. And just to add to Lucy, follow us on Inspired Capital on Instagram, Alexa Von Tobel, Lucy Deland. You can message us. We answer all of them instantly. You can email us directly, but we do want to hear from you.
Okay. You said earlier that we're in 2020. We'll end the year in 2030. What do you think the lasting changes occasioned by the pandemic will be? How will life be different permanently because of what happened this year?
Well, I think go ahead, Lucy.
I was just going to say, I think it goes without saying that we are all going to be, that the embrace of remote work and the flexibility it provides is going to be a huge part of the next chapter. And I think the one that we deal with next is, how do we live in a hybrid world between going to the office, working remotely, and having teams that are doing both. So I think that's going to be sort of, if the last 6 months were how do we work remotely, the next 9 years are going to be how do we do both. And I think there are going to be some really interesting and exciting companies that emerge from solving that particular problem.
That's a great answer. Alexa, what would you say?
I would just add that, I think we're in so many ways rewiring society. I think, there was this huge ball of momentum for the last centuries that helped us get to a place where in 2019, we were frenzied, we were running, we were, taking on all these logistical challenges, and then the world stopped. And we're in many ways rewiring what makes sense for us to do and how can we live in a way that's better for the planet, better for families, better for work. How do we accomplish more? And I think we're in the middle of that rewiring, and that extends from, can I see a doctor over Zoom, which used to be at 5%. It's now at 70% in some places. That's wild. The fact that we went into offices 5 days a week, but what if we only did 2 to 3? And what would that mean for better stabilization of families and for raising children? And we used to fly nonstop to things, and now we think we stopped and realize, this conference is better. More people get to attend it. That's incredible than if we were all huddled in a tiny room that couldn't keep 25,000 people. So we're rewiring society, and I hope in many ways for the better. And there will be dramatic softwares and technologies and advancements that help us do that right now. And at Inspired, we're looking for those big swings that make our infrastructure of the way we live and work and operate better.
Great, thank you. Now, with the last minute we have, let me ask you one question, pointing out that most entrepreneurs who get started, statistically speaking, do not succeed. But both of you have succeeded spectacularly. And I'll put this question to you first, Lucy. If you had to summarize it quickly, why you? Why you among so many entrepreneurs? Why did you succeed?
Well, I'd say a lot inside of Inspired that you have to work really hard to get lucky. So I will always credit luck as part of the journey. Not to say that it didn't come with an incredible amount of hard work, but I think particularly in the paperless context and what we're trying to replicate in Inspired is an obsessive focus on the product and the end consumer. And while you're trying to build to hundreds of millions of people in the former, you want to think about each and every individual and how you are delighting them and why you're bringing a piece of joy, a piece of efficiency, a piece of something they might not have had by delivering your product. And I think no detail in that environment can be overlooked. And so I think it always comes back to hard work, but I think with intent, with a mission, and making sure that you're listening to whomever it is your end customer or consumer.
Okay, well, let's leave it there. You have to work really hard to get lucky. I think that's a good motto for entrepreneurship. And on behalf of all of us at Inc., we've been very lucky to have both of you. Alexa von Tobel and Lucy Deland, thank you for being part of the Inc. 5000 Vision Conference.
Thank you, Eric.